I am 28 years old and a single woman. My name is Courtney. I don't work for any company. I live at home with my mom and older sister Catherine, who is 2 years my senior, and so my family has named me unemployable trash, and I am well into my 20s, 28 years old, and I'm even living in my room. You, unemployed trash, pay the rent this month. My sister's banging on the door and yelling as well. After graduating from school, Catherine got a job at a local company. However, she quit. She claimed it was due to terrible juniors. According to the rumors, it seems she was the one bullying the juniors, which became a problem. Now she sometimes takes up short-term, part-time jobs. In other words, she's a part-timer. Catherine often says, "Even though I only work part-time, at least I'm working. You're the unemployed trash who isn't. That means you're the lowest in this house." And that's how she refers to me, as unemployed trash. By the way, I'm not very good at interacting with people. The reason dates back to my school days. When I was in elementary and middle school, I was often compared to my sister, who is only 2 years older than me. Catherine was the flashy, sociable type, and even her classmates would joke around asking me things like, "Are you really Catherine's younger sister?" It wasn't just because I was more reserved compared to Catherine that these things happened. Catherine loved to tease me by labeling me as a failure and spreading rumors about me to her classmates. She would say I talked to bugs in our garden or locked myself in my room and read strange books all the time, probably the kind that nerds read. She spread stories about me, both true and false. I believe I wouldn't have been so introverted if it weren't for Catherine. Because of Catherine's rumors and influence, I was gradually labeled as a nerd or geek and eventually began to fit those labels. I started avoiding kids at school. I didn't join any clubs, never hung out with friends, and as soon as classes ended, I'd rush straight home. The time before Catherine came home was the only time I felt at peace, because I knew I'd be teased again when she returned. I had hobbies, so I immersed myself in them to escape reality. My mother scolded me for that behavior. "If you continue like this, you won't be able to make it in society," was her favorite phrase. Her next line would always be, "You should take Catherine as an example." I couldn't possibly emulate Catherine, who cornered me nearly every day. By the way, my mother was a stay-at-home mom and had never worked in society. My mother divorced my father when I was still very young. When my father was around, my mother, Catherine, and I had a better relationship than we do now. However, after the divorce, both of them began directing their negative emotions towards me. It seemed the reason was that I resembled my father. My mother doted on Catherine, who resembled her. She would throw away things I bought with my saved allowance, while Catherine would get expensive birthday gifts, and I would just receive candy. Both my mother and Catherine would say, "Everything we do is for Courtney's sake. We're just trying to encourage her to be a brighter child." But to me, they were merely justifying their actions. In reality, it was not my mother but my father who earned the money for our living expenses and money to raise us children. Even though he no longer lived with us, he made sure to transfer enough money so that Catherine and I didn't struggle financially. I contacted my father secretly without letting my mother know. My father and I kept in touch occasionally. When it came time to choose a high school, he told me, "Go to the school you want, Courtney. I'll pay for it." He seemed to have persuaded my mother later on. Thanks to him, I was able to attend the high school I wanted, but my mother became even stricter with me, seemingly displeased that I had gone through my father. She would complain loudly enough for me to hear, saying things like, "It's tough having an incompetent daughter," or "It's strange how Catherine is so responsible." Over time, I had mostly stopped talking to my mother about myself or my future. Based on past experiences of being dismissed, I believed it would be futile to share, and I decided it would be better to handle things on my own. My mother held a grudge because I had once tattled to my father, and her response was merely, "Once you turn 18, do whatever you want." Thus, as time passed with my mother and Catherine unaware of what I was doing, Both my sister and I grew up. Despite everything, I wished for reconciliation with my mother and Catherine. Our bond weakened due to the divorce, but I held on to the hope that even a small gesture could mend things. Every year I picked out gifts and celebrated Catherine's birthday. "What's this? Such poor taste," Catherine would sometimes say. I tried cooking meals in the kitchen. However, my mother told me, "This isn't edible. Don't do it again." No matter what I did, I couldn't improve my relationship with the two of them. This went on for many years, and I began eating out more often. "How can you afford such luxuries? Where are you getting the money?" Although my mother scolded me this way, I dodged her questions by saying I had a part-time job. After turning 22, I started paying rent. My father's financial support ended. Catherine quit her job, and both she and my mother had no income. Their harassment intensified, perhaps due to financial insecurity, and I began being charged $500 a month for rent and food expenses. Catherine, on the other hand, wasn't paying anything. While it's true she used a room in the house, we never ate together and lived separately under the same roof. Still, I decided to pay. I thought, my family is in trouble. I have to help. However, I was shocked to discover something. Apart from me, my mother was asking her own parents for a monthly allowance of $4,000. As close as I am with my grandparents, they consulted with me about the allowance. I was shocked to discover that my mother was demanding such a large sum every month. My grandparents are elderly and not working anymore. There's no way they could afford to pay that amount monthly. I asked my grandparents to send the $4,000 they'd give me to my mother on my behalf. I then apologized for burdening them with my mother's demands. While my grandparents looked apologetic, they told me, "Don't worry about the money." There's a reason I chose not to give the money directly to my mother. I feared she would take advantage if she knew I had money. I hoped that with Catherine finding a new job and the financial concerns being alleviated, they would return to how they once were. Holding on to that hope, I continued to pay a total of $4,500. By the way, Mom and I are moving to a new apartment soon. My mother was smirking on the side. "A new apartment?" I hesitantly asked. What Catherine proudly presented was a brochure of a luxury high-rise apartment. "Here, it's amazing, isn't it?" The location, amenities, and view were indeed top-notch. It was amazing, but I couldn't comprehend who was going to pay for it or why they were moving there. After all, Catherine works part-time jobs. As I was staring at the brochure, lost in thought, Catherine mentioned, "I might let you live there too." "Me too?" I asked. "You're an unemployed trash who can't do anything without us, right? If you really insist, I'm saying I might let you live there." "What will happen to this house?" I asked. "We'll start the selling process and put it on the market within a month," Catherine said. Setting aside Catherine's annoying comments, I had been feeling that our current house was a bit cramped. It might still sell, but it's a bit old. Whether the condo Catherine showed was worth the price needed to be evaluated, but the idea of acquiring a high-value property now did cross my mind. I decided to consult with a friend knowledgeable about real estate investment about the condo. He's a friend from my student days. His comment, "I think it's a decent property," became the deciding factor for me. Later on, I informed my mother and Catherine that I was thinking of moving into the condo. My mother and Catherine exchanged glances and smirked. They must have been thrilled, as from the beginning, they had probably intended for me to pay the rent. "Then we need to start the paperwork immediately," my mother said cheerfully. "You, the shut-in, can use this as practice to go out." "Go handle it," Catherine said to me. I had planned to go anyway, so I didn't retort. I immediately contacted the real estate agency, went to their office, and proceeded with the purchase, not the rent. When I returned home and informed them that I had completed the procedures, both my mother and Catherine cheered out loud. I hurriedly headed to my room to escape the noisy pair. A few days before the scheduled moving day, there was a note on the boxes containing my belongings reading, No need to transport. Hey, what's this about? I asked my mother and Catherine. They had finished their preparations and were leisurely drinking tea. It's your stuff, right? It's something off. Catherine pretended not to understand on purpose. Oh, we're moving tomorrow, right? I asked. What are you talking about? Only Mom and I are moving to the condo. Plus, we've decided to sell this house. You need to leave ASAP. We're leaving you behind because you're bad luck. Realize you can't be unemployed forever. Stand on your own 2 feet. My mother also made some nasty remarks. I see. I simply responded and returned to my room. On the moving day, my mother and Catherine's belongings were being rapidly taken out. They were very excited and bragged to the movers, "We're moving to a condo. The night view is amazing." Of course, they completely ignored me. I stayed in my room, focusing on my own work. A few hours later, I was bombarded with calls from my mother and Catherine. Hello. Hey, unemployed trash, what's going on? They told us the contract isn't set up. Courtney, didn't you handle the paperwork? I thought you could at least manage that, you useless piece of junk. The shouting was so loud I instinctively moved the phone away from my ear. Well, I did expect something like this, I said. I did handle the paperwork. What do you mean? They told us we aren't the current leaseholders. Catherine's voice was high-pitched and piercing. I did handle it. I didn't rent, I bought it. But since only Mom and you were supposed to live there, I sold it. But sold? Catherine asked. That's right. The day they told me I couldn't move with them, I sold the apartment. It was a bit of a hassle, but I didn't want to pay for a home that only they would live in. It sounded like the two were arguing over the phone. I said to them, "Why don't the two of you just renegotiate the contract?" My naive sister suggested, "Right, Mom? Let's just contract it again for us. We can make Courtney pay us back later." Yes, let's do that, it seemed Mother agreed. The phone abruptly hung up. A few hours later, the phone rang again with Catherine's shrill voice. You schemed something, didn't you? What are you talking about? They said we can't sign a contract. I figured as much, I said. You can't. Why? I don't know. They said something technical, something about not having enough credit or something. Catherine isn't the sharpest tool in the shed. She probably doesn't understand the term credit. That means they don't trust you to sign a contract, I explained slowly, as if teaching kids. What? I don't get this credibility thing. It's about social credibility. You often claim to be a part-timer but barely work, making you pretty much unemployed trash. They won't lease to someone like that. Why could you, an unemployed trash, sign it and not me? Something's fishy. You must have rigged something. This conversation was getting nowhere. I decided it was time to explain clearly why I was able to purchase the apartment. Listen, Catherine and Mom, are you listening? Remember I went to an art school. Despite Mom being against it because it was far away, I've always been drawing, and I won a national competition in high school. My achievements were recognized, and I got a scholarship to attend the famous art university. Neither of you knew, did you? I never told you guys. I'm still drawing, using Dad's room for it. The monthly rent of $4,000 might seem high, but I felt it was okay given the hassle of moving. Oh, I'll send you that link to my portfolio website. I sent the link of my creator profile to both Catherine's and Mom's phones. This site showcased my achievements and past works. There's also a contact form for potential buyers of my artwork. I'm not an unemployed trash. I've been investing my income as well. I think my annual income is on par with business owners. My income is leagues ahead of yours, Catherine, who claims to be a part-timer. That's why I have credibility. What you're saying is a lie. Stop making things up. Catherine's voice was faint and incredulous. Our e-university artworks? I could faintly hear my mother's voice. I've never been particularly good at interacting with people. However, I've always had a keen interest in art and paintings. I started to find joy in drawing objects around the house, replicating plants, and copying insects. The art book that my father secretly bought for me on my birthday is a treasured item. To my unsophisticated sister Catherine, it probably looked like something a nerd would read. Being a successful artist, I, of course, don't work for a company. To my mother and Catherine, I probably appeared as an unemployed recluse, an unemployed trash. After all, they've never shown any interest in me before. They have no clue about the real me. I don't know or care if you're some great person, but I won't forgive you for betraying Mom and me. I was even impressed that they could pick a fight at this moment. You're selling the house within this month, right? What? Selling it. That's what you and Catherine decided, right? To kick me out. I could tell over the phone that both my mother and Catherine were speechless. I've already moved, as told, to one of the apartments I had invested in. I heard my mother and Catherine starting to panic on the other end, saying things like, "This is bad. We have to cancel the sale." After they removed their belongings, I had another moving company take out the rest. I'm already relaxing in my new place, sipping my coffee. I remarked, "Looks like you two might end up homeless. Hope you can cancel the sale in time. How much more will you mock your family to feel satisfied?" Hearing her say that for the first time, I shouted back in anger, "That's my line. I don't expect them to understand how I've felt all these years being treated as the lowest in the family. I don't want to feel sorry for myself. There were so many things I couldn't do because of Catherine, many things I resented her for. But I believe the path I chose was right. Through art, I've made many friends and acquaintances, and then I'm engaged. I'll be living in my new home with my fiancé, so there's no room for you. Please enjoy living without the newest advances," I declared and hung up. "Are you okay?" The whine, cautiously asking from behind, was my husband. He seemed surprised because I rarely raise my voice. "Yeah, I'm fine. They're like parasites, so they'll figure things out even without me. I've given up on my sister in her 30s who's jobless, and my mother in her 40s who's the same. They somehow managed to cancel the sale of the house and moved back in. I lost all reasons and the willingness to pay them rent or the $4,000, so I stopped all financial support. It seems my penniless mother turned to my grandparents again. Courtney did something terrible. She's the worst. It's all because of her that we don't have money. That's what she seemed to have claimed. She probably thought things would work out if she just acted spoiled as always. However, my grandparents were furious when they heard the whole story from me. Shameless. The one who's truly awful is you, isn't it? How could you treat Courtney like that all these years, mocking her, demanding her money, treating her like a nuisance? Unbelievable. You deserve to be abandoned. My mother lost trust even from her own relatives. Catherine tried to get a job again, but it seems she's struggling. It had been years since she last worked. She occasionally called me. "Courtney, I realized I was wrong too. Let's put that behind us. Can you introduce me to a job or maybe a man who can be my husband?" I was wrong too. What does she mean by I was wrong too? As expected, Catherine never changes. Asking for a job is one thing, but including a husband in the mix, she's clearly looking to leech off someone. "Sorry, I don't think I know of any jobs or men that would be a match for you." Meaning she's too much to handle. "Oh well, let me know if you find any." Does Catherine think a prince will come to whisk her away? She's already 30, yet still so immature. In this respect, Catherine and my mother are so alike. The reason my mother divorced my father was because she solely depended on his income without doing anything herself. My father, having a job with frequent overseas assignments, found it challenging to raise children, so he had no choice but to entrust their custody to my mother. He told my mother to raise us properly since he was providing ample child support. As a result, while my mother doted on Catherine, it seemed she grew to resent me, who took after my father. And now, even I have turned my back on my mother. If Catherine ever gets married, I can already foresee a similar future for her. I'm glad. I couldn't help but let those words slip about what my husband asks, that I didn't turn out like Catherine, with a kind husband and a fulfilling life and a job. I have things that neither my mother nor Catherine possess, especially considering I grew up being treated poorly by both of them.